Welcome, Buff fans, to another edition of the Primetime Night Owls. Although we keep doing this during the day, Matt, but we are night owls, so it still works. But the Buffs are coming off of a really nice win, another one. They keep getting these nice wins, Matt, and 41-27 down in Lubbock at Texas Tech. They fought through flying tortillas. They fought through a rough start of that game, and flying water bottles, things like that, and got themselves a nice win and moved up to number 18 in the AP poll. I'm curious to see where they're going to end up in the CFP. They were number 20 last week, Matt. We'll get into that. I'm talking too long to start, but I'm curious to see where they're going to land on Tuesday night. But it was a great win down there. I mean, that we thought going into last week, that's the toughest game of the last four, and they went out and got it.
Yeah, it was a big test. And, people are like, oh, you guys don't believe. I've seen this now for maybe 4 or 5 weeks because we call something a
4 or 5 weeks.
Well, I'm talking about
yeah.
no, that specifically. But I mean, since they've started to play better, just because they're playing better doesn't mean you don't still have to pass tests. Like Kansas coming up in a couple of weeks on the road at Arrowhead, that's going to be another test. And so is this weekend, oh, by the way, with that Utah defense. But we'll get there. I think our point is that you grow as the season goes on. And as the season goes on, it gets harder. And that's why we have said for the last several episodes now, when you get to November, Coach Mike McIntyre used to call them the gold games. They're the games you get remembered for. They're the most important because they're the toughest to get. Usually teams are the most desperate. And when another team has a lot to play for, like Texas Tech did the other night, those games mean even more. And they're coming at you with everything. And you brought up the environment. First of all, Lubbock, you can have it. It's just that, in my opinion on Texas, and I'll go on the record, it's all chain restaurants and highways. I think that's pretty much like all of America, but Texas specifically, that's all they got down there. So I'm good on Texas. Although I'll be glad if we have to go back there at least one more time before the calendar's out this year.
It might be twice.
It might, unfortunately, but let's just keep our sights set on hopefully just once. Is that okay? Can we put that energy out there?
Let's worry about the one time. Yeah.
Let's just worry about the one time. Anyway, so the point is that was an extremely challenging environment that, as I've had some time removed from it, Colorado loses that game last year 10 out of 10 times, in my opinion. You do not weather the start, and they might lose that game if they played it at the beginning of the year within their first few games.
Yeah.
It was extremely impressive, and I'll tell you this. How many games are we in now? 21 games in?
Yeah. No, yeah. 21 games with Coach Prime.
I believe.
Number 21.
And it's been earned. And it's been earned. Yeah. And I realized it the moment I was sitting on the field, because I was watching the game at field level and doing my thing. It's 13-0. There wasn't a thought in my mind that they were screwed. Not a thought. And at Nebraska, when they went down, I knew it was over.
Right.
Even though they rebounded, I knew it was done. It just wasn't meant to be. I've seen enough college football with my own eyes to know what it looks like. I believe. Yeah. And sure enough, they came right back because why? They are a really good football team that has shown consistency and has developed an identity now. And that, to me, was a moment where I just sat back and reflected there on the field for a moment, like, wow, they've done it. Yeah. And no matter what happens from here on out, you make the college football playoff, you make the Big 12 championship, you don't, they have done it. And the ultimate tip of the cap, because it was earned. And, I think that's why sometimes when you just heap praise, I think it's cheap sometimes. Okay.
Yeah.
It has to be earned. For me, that's when it matters the most. And I was sitting there and watching the press conferences and seeing the way they came back. Did they play well? Not particularly, but they beat the snot out of those guys. Okay. They played well enough to win on the road, and that's all that matters.
Right.
And when you're finding different ways to win, that to me is the most signature trait of a great team. And Colorado has done that, and they're closing out on becoming a great team. And if they finish this calendar the way that we think they can, they will have established themselves as a great team. And really good is nothing to turn your nose up at. Right. But we're talking about great. Great means you're remembered forever. You and I will remember 2016 forever. If they get to 10, shoot, Brian, I think they're probably there in my own mind right now.
Right. Yeah.
But they've got to dot that I and cross that T. So I believe.
Well, and some of the fans that when I read the comments on these videos, they get tired of us comparing to 2016. But
I
I
don't
will
care.
say this: I'm doing it because number one, that's the only really good football team I've covered so far at CU. And
Yeah.
number two, this team is doing a lot of things for the
Yeah.
first time since 2016, right? And even sometimes since before that. But I think the thing, Matt, you bring up a good point, is that this team's gotten better. This team was not this good in September.
No.
And so, when I was I'm an AP voter, and when I was getting criticized by some fans, like, how could you not have them in the top 25? They weren't a top 25 team
No.
in September.
They
They
would tell you that, by the
they
way.
would tell you that. In fact, I saw Bucky respond to something. I can't remember what point it was after UCF or whatever, when he actually said on social media, he goes, "We're not there yet."
Yeah,
He knew
even
it
after
then.
the UCF win. Yeah.
They weren't quite there yet.
No.
They've gotten better. This is a much better football team right now than it was even in Orlando. I think Orlando made a flip the switch, but I think they're a better football team than they were even then. And it's interesting. I told Uncle Neely, after the press conference the other day, because there was a moment where I kind of waiting for some videos to upload and things like that, and I said, this is my 15th year covering CU, 10th year really traveling with them. It's rare that I've gone into an opposing press box and sat down and thought, yeah, the Buffs are going to win this game. I mean, how often can we have confidence that they're going to win a game like that? And you're right, even down 13-0, I'm like, man, this is an awful start. But I'm sitting there thinking, really, outside that first drive, Texas Tech hasn't done a ton. And if the Buffs score here, then they're right back in it. And I love what Shador said after the game. He said, we're down 13-0, and one of the coaches comes up and says, the best part about this? We're down 13-0, and there's zero panic on this sideline. And
Yeah.
that's the sign of a great team. Is they were like, I don't know, I think it was you that might have asked, like, Shador, what were you feeling in that moment? He goes, nothing. I
Yeah.
was like, whatever.
Yeah.
Who cares? Like, it's their, and Cam Stillman Craig is like, that's a field goal to us. Like, whatever. This team has gained so much confidence. They were not this confident in September. They've always been a confident team. They were not this confident in September. They are a much better football team. And you're right. One other thing, Matt, before I turn it back over to you, is I asked Cam Stillman Craig about if this compared to Nebraska, and he said it really didn't. And I understand that. I think Nebraska's atmosphere was insane, but I think in some ways they did compare to me, because in both cases the Buffs had an awful start and got behind the eight ball big time on the road in a pretty hostile environment. I think these two were the two most hostile environments they've been in, Nebraska and Texas Tech. Nebraska, they didn't weather it, and they had a better second half. This one, they were like, whatever. And I thought that they learned a little bit from Nebraska, and just they showed some maturity as a team that they've had throughout the season.
When was the last time they got punched in the mouth on the road outside of
Well,
Nebraska? So Nebraska. So I would say
Washington
UCF.
State.
Well, yeah, for sure. So let's go through this year.
Oh, you
so,
mean this year?
This year, Arizona didn't do it. Arizona gave the
No.
game away with the first play. UCF, I mean, Shador did throw that interception right away.
That was a quick punch, yeah.
Yeah, it was a quick punch, but I wouldn't say like knocked them down. You know what I mean?
UCF didn't score.
Yeah, Nebraska did it. Yeah, Preston made the play. Nebraska did it. You brought it up. Washington State did it. Oregon did it.
CSU didn't do it this year.
No, CSU didn't do it this year. Is there anything else I'm missing there?
Well, I mean, they won 3 road games last year, and they
Arizona State didn't do that.
No, I can't remember that one as much. TCU was back and forth, but I think CU punched first in that one.
I agree.
So
so here's my point: is normally, or at least in the past, they had wilted in those moments.
Yeah,
and they got down. Texas Tech scored their first 4 drives. There was a lot of momentum.
First 3.
Was it first 3?
Yeah,
I thought it was
3.
4. Okay, but did CU punt for 4 consecutive drives?
Yeah, I think they punted 4 times. Yeah,
maybe that's where it was switched in my mind.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So CU has to punt for 4 consecutive drives, Brian. I mean, there is a lot of history there to suggest that maybe the offense just isn't going to find a way to get it going. But to your point, they didn't panic. Shador and Cam said it. And you see it on the well-off videos. They're adjusting. They're making corrections on the sideline. They're not screaming at each other. They're not freaking out. They're not, pointing fingers. They're all collaborating to work together.
Yeah.
And what you can tell is they're having a lot of fun. And when
Right.
you can mix the fun into it, and
Hmm.
obviously winning is fun, but I think it's the joy of competing that gets these guys going because
Yeah.
they felt that way down 13-0. And the coaches were reminding everybody to, hey, stick in there. But
Hmm.
I think it was just another feather in their cap of, okay, here's another little piece of adversity that we can deal with. Because I'll tell you, I'm sitting right next to the speakers in the Colorado sideline where they were pumping in crowd volume. It was the loudest crowd noise being injected into a stadium I've ever heard. I legitimately had to wear my wireless earbuds for a day after my ear was ringing. They had a microphone in front of the band, they piped it in. They had the crowd, they had the music and the announcer piped in. It
Yeah.
was so loud from I've never seen a team do that before. They had 4 speakers down there. And somebody asked me, why is that allowed? I think it's one of those things where it's kind of like a gray area where it's frowned upon. It's like that's
Yeah.
kind of a Bush League move, in my opinion, with how
Yeah.
loud it is. You ask anybody on the field, they will tell you the same. Snelson, Bucky, Ryan Green, DNVR, we're all sitting down there kind of, I mean, everybody was. And the Tech cheerleaders, I was asking them, because even they were doing this. I said, does this normally happen? They go, that's normally never there. And so this was their Super Bowl. We've been talking about it. But to
Yeah.
your point, it was like a mini version of Lincoln at first. And that's why we talk about the adversity and being able to bounce back.
Right.
Because
Hmm.
was it a hostile environment? You bet. Were the tortillas on the field a distraction, even though they downplayed it? You bet. That
Yeah.
was crazy on the field. I got tagged in the back of the head by somebody who wadded up a tortilla and put something hard in it. And I didn't turn around because I was like, I'm not giving this little snot-nosed kid the
Yeah.
satisfaction of me going, who did that? I'm not doing that. But
Yeah.
it hurt. And so it was like this. I can't believe they allowed it. First of all, the referees totally screwed that game over by
Oh,
not getting a handle on
that was
that.
one of the worst officiated games I've ever covered.
Horrible.
That was,
Horrible.
and
I thought it was going to be like the Coors Event Center or CU Event Center. You
yeah,
rip up the newspaper, you throw it in the air, the first basket,
and that's
it's
done.
over.
Yeah. Yeah.
But it
Yeah.
doesn't mean you're throwing newspaper on the court or on
Right.
the field. Like, that's crazy to me that they
Right.
allow foreign objects to be hurled at the field. Of course, they're going to throw
Over
things.
and over and over again.
It was all game long. It
Yeah.
was all game long.
It-
I got hit by so many tortillas. Eventually, I was like, enough. I can't
yeah.
look at another tortilla for like another couple of months now. Anyway, the point was that was obviously way over the line in my opinion. And I'm not one of those people to really complain too much. I'm a
Yeah.
fan of college traditions. I love the hostile environments. But when and somebody on social media, and we don't have confirmation on this, but somebody said Jimmy slipped on one, and maybe that's why he got hurt. I don't know if that's true because I feel like a cleat would puncture the
That's
tortilla,
what I
but
thought too. Yeah.
maybe it would. The point is it's just not safe because it promotes everybody throwing stuff on the field. At halftime,
Yeah.
I saw guys got tagged with full water bottles and beer cans,
Hmm.
and it was awful. It was awful. And shame on them for allowing it to go on. And more than that, it was just the whole environment. Everybody was revved up, and normally CU would lose that type of a game. That's not the
Yeah.
team they are anymore. And
Yeah.
I believe I believed in them when they were down 13, full well knowing this is no problem here.
Yeah.
Like, this is no problem. And it was at that moment that I said they've done it. And at least for me,
Yeah.
that was when I officially said, okay, because for me, you've got to stack them. You got to have them on the wall to point to. You can't just talk about what you might do one day. You've got to have it. And now they do. And look at the position that they're in. So it doesn't mean I didn't believe in them, but I have such a great respect for how hard it is to put it all together at this level, that to do it is really a tremendous achievement, not something to be taken for granted. And when you do it, you got to take advantage of it. So
Yeah.
that's where I'm at right now.
Well, and credit to Joey McGuire, the Texas Tech head coach. Even he afterwards was like, "I'm surprised we didn't get a penalty." I am too. He's like, I can't believe it. He goes, people handing me like vapes and beer cans that were thrown, things like that, and he's like, I can't believe we didn't get a penalty. They should have been penalized several times. But it was.
Can I say something on that? And I'm really
Yeah.
glad you brought that up. You're 100% right. If that doesn't draw a flag, then what does? In
Right.
fact, I was just reading this morning the Utah BYU cheer head coach after their game got knocked unconscious by a full water bottle thrown onto the feet. Excuse me, thrown onto the field. This is a national problem here that they
Yeah.
need to address. You
Yeah.
need to start penalizing these incidents because why? Somebody already got hurt. So
Yeah.
I just read about it this morning. I think it was the Utah cheer coach that got tagged by a full bottle, or maybe it was BYU. I can't remember, but one of them did. I'm surprised nothing happened in Lubbock.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy. Two of the funny, it was a serious thing. Two of the funnier responses to that I thought were Shador saying, hey, they kept throwing to me, so I signed one. And then the other one was Mata. His tweet was hilarious to me. That he's like, "Look, if you're going to do tortillas, at least do corn. Come on, man."
I did see that.
That was
There were
pretty
plenty
funny.
of corn tortillas down there, though.
We're
I
there.
will say,
Okay,
yeah,
okay.
yeah, yeah. There were plenty.
So
There was everything.
yeah,
It was a
yeah,
huge waste of food. It's a
yeah,
dumb tradition. I want to be on the record again. I think it should be banned and disallowed unless or it's one time and it's a one time and you're done, which I
yeah.
think it normally is more of that, but obviously they were all keyed up.
Well, I
So,
will say, I asked, heading down to the press conference. One last thing on this. So
yeah.
heading down to the press conference, I was riding in the elevator with a Texas Tech beat writer, and I said, "Is that normal? What was happening tonight?" And he goes, "Well, yes." He goes, "When things don't go well for these fans in a big game, that's how
Mm,
they act."
mm.
And
Well,
he goes, "So in that regard, it's normal." I was like, "Okay, well, things didn't go well for them in a big game, that's for sure." And I'll
that
say
is
this as
a
far as,
really good metaphor,
yeah.
Brian.
Well, and I'll say this as far as like the
Yeah,
belief and things like that.
yeah,
You and I have been high on this Buffs team all along. I mean,
yeah.
I remember I've referenced this before. I did a radio show in the press box. It was a national radio show, and it was right before the North Dakota State game was starting. So right before they kicked off,
Yeah.
and they were surprised when I told them. They asked what I thought would happen this season. I said, I think if a bowl game is their floor, and if things go well, they can compete for the Big 12 title. And they were stunned that I said that, because they're like, we haven't heard anybody say like that definitively, like that they could be that good. And I was like, no, I think things could go well. So I believed, but I think that one of the things,
Mm,
as people listen to us kind of critique them, is you have to understand that yes, there's some belief there, but we also know that, as Shador said this summer, they're everybody's Super Bowl, which means everybody wants to beat them badly. And so they're going to get everybody's best shot. And so that's why the Buffs have to be at their best week after week after week. And sometimes they're not, and they still win. But, when we're critiquing them, I think the stakes get a little higher with each week. And so some of the blemishes get highlighted, and you've got to say, yeah, they're doing really well, but they've got to fix this and this and this. And so when we critique them, we're going to, point out some of those things as well, because we see pretty good potential in this team, but they can only reach it if they're going to fix some of these things that are going on, right?
And by the way, after the game the other night, he may have just been saying this, but Coach Prime did say, I appreciate your honesty and you're critical when you need to be. He was kind of talking, I think, more to the local group than he was
Yeah,
to
yeah,
kind of the national group when he said
right.
that. But I would say, by and large, the people who are around the team, nobody's really all that afraid to be critical. I really don't think so anymore. If
Yeah.
it's deserving, they will. And so, and when
He
there's
even
praise
said
to be
that
given,
he was, look, if we don't play well, say it.
yeah,
You know,
100%. And look, I mean, you and I try to do this as objectively as we can, right? With everybody understanding that we do want to see this team have success. I think that's pretty easy to explain, and there's
right.
nothing wrong with that. So, okay, so you just said, we believed in this team from the beginning. One of my hot takes at the beginning of the year was, by the end of the season, after seeing what I saw at the open practice, and given it was just one practice that I saw, my one hot take was, by the end of the year, this team would be relying on their defense more than their offense. And I think that's kind of what we're seeing. When we talked about at the beginning of the year, projecting them to potentially get hot and go on a run, at
Mhm.
least I don't know where your head was at, but my head was at, well, you got all these weapons outside. You're scoring 45 a game. You know what I mean? Shador's throwing for 400 touchdowns
Mhm.
and, 404 touchdowns every weekend. But that's not really how you win. You never see teams,
Right.
unless you're like LSU or something like that in 2019, win that way. It's the balanced teams most of the time that can do a little bit of
Right.
everything. You can
Mhm.
play some defense, you can run the football, and you adjust and you adapt. And I think that's what this coaching staff is leagues better at than they were last year. Defensively, they have impressed the hell out of me as this season has gone on,
Mhm.
because here's what happened against Kansas State. I think they had the right structure of a game plan. They couldn't execute and adjust to slow
Right.
DJ Giddens down.
Right.
Against Cincinnati, it started that way against Corey Kiner and Evan Pryor, but they did adjust. And at
Yeah.
Texas Tech, it only took them a quarter. It took them about a half, I thought, to do it, maybe like a quarter and a half against Cincinnati at home. At Texas Tech, it took them about a quarter, and then they started bottling everything up. And even at the
Well, but
beginning, they
even
weren't getting gas.
well against the run, it didn't take any time at all. I mean, they shut down.
That's what I'm saying. That's my
They,
point.
I mean, it was the passing game that was gashing them, but
Right.
yeah, they shut down Tosh Brooks immediately.
Immediately. They do a
Mhm.
great job of trying to make you
Yeah.
play left-handed. They
Yep.
really do. And Robert Livingston
Mhm.
is a feel guy. He likes to kind of feel his way in and adjust as things happen. And you even heard that in the well-off video where he says, "Hey guys, that's on me. Those were some, crappy calls that I made. So please, just I'm in this together with you. I'm in the trenches. I've got accountability here. My
Yeah.
hand
Yeah.
is also in this." And so I just like that because it creates that sense of belief from your players that, okay, not everybody's going to be perfect every snap. We're going to try our absolute best and do everything we can to be. But if not, we got each other's backs and we're going to bounce back. And they didn't have that as a team last year. Flat out.
Mhm.
They didn't have that. They have that this year. And I think, honestly, defensively, Robert Livingston has a lot to do with that. I do.
Yeah, I agree with you. And one of the more impressive things to me about this team, and we heard it in this post-game press conference, is the Buffs have not always had good starts, right?
Right.
And so we were asking them about that. And a lot of times, I think for years, you get the answer of, yeah, we just need to come out better and settle into the game, things like that. They articulate what's going on with them. And Cam
Yeah.
Silman Craig is like, Shador has said it before. It's like, you get through teams have their first 15 scripted. I think it was Silman Craig saying this. He goes, they got their first 15 scripted. And so we kind of go through those first 15 and say, okay, that's what they're going to do to us. And then they make the adjustment. And Shador kind of does the same thing. Like he said it before. He's like, early on, I kind of go through and it's like, okay, let's see how they're going to play this. We've seen things on tape. We know they're going to mix things up. Let's see how they're going to play it. And then, okay, that's what they're going to do. And it may take 2, 3, 4 drives, but then they're going to settle in. And I think it's I think it's fascinating to listen to those guys articulate it that way. That like, look, we're kind of reading things early on. You want to have a better start, but once they settle in and they're this team has shown they're really smart at like, okay, we just figured you out,
Mm-hmm.
and
We
then
solved your puzzle.
we solved your puzzle in 15 plays.
Yep.
You know,
No,
it's
it's a
almost
really
like
good point.
name that tune. We can
Yeah.
solve this puzzle in 15
Yeah.
plays, whatever.
Yeah.
And yes, it's not like they were perfect after that. They gave up, 2 touchdowns in the second half, and you don't want to give those up. But for the most part, really after that first drive that Texas Tech had, they really shut them down from that point. For the most part, there was a couple big plays that, led to, a couple field goals, things like that. But I just think it's impressive how this team really has the intelligence to look and say, we see what you're doing. All right, we're going to adjust. And then the other team doesn't adjust back.
No, we have seen a lack of counterpunching to a real
Yeah.
degree this year.
Mm-hmm.
And I think part of it is because once CU's talent gets a hold of you, tough to get their hooks out because they're pretty good at a lot of positions, especially
Right.
if you can get those pass rushers now that they're getting after the quarterback. And hey, you know who turned out to be right is BJ Green.
Yeah.
When BJ Green told us he thinks the dam is about to break,
Yeah.
that was him, right? Who told us
Yeah.
earlier in the year? Well, it
Yep.
like almost happened. What was it, a game after that?
Yep.
And they now lead the Big 12 in sacks. If you can get those pass rushers with that secondary, they are a really hard team to come back on right now. And look at what Texas Tech had to do to just move the football at the end. They had to run
Yeah.
the ball. And that
Yeah.
ate away so much clock. If
Right.
Colorado called offensively a little bit smarter of a game there at the end, that doesn't end up the way it did. I felt like they kind of, in my opinion, I
Yeah.
felt like they got away from doing a few things that probably would have helped kill a little bit of that clock. Now, that being said, I actually didn't have a problem with them being a little bit more aggressive at the end than I thought maybe they would have been in a different situation because the animosity had built from that entire experience with the crowd where no, it's like, you
Yeah.
know what? Screw you guys. Here's another one to Travis. Like, I have no
Right.
problem with that
Right.
at the
Right.
end. I kind of felt like that's how it played out. The point is that that's why I don't really give them as hard of a time on the end of game management with this game compared to some of the other ones that I have in the past. There was a bit of a middle finger moment they wanted to have there with how they were treated. Not only, by the way, by the crowd, but by the officiating crew.
Yeah.
Okay. That was a game where not only you had to beat Texas Tech, you had to beat their crowd and you had to beat the refs. How many of
Yeah.
those games has Colorado lost that you and I have seen? Where
Yeah. A
maybe you had a
lot.
chance to beat that team, but you
Yeah.
couldn't beat the crowd and the refs.
Yeah. A lot. And I will say this real quick on the end game. I
Yeah.
didn't like how they played defense in the fourth quarter and kind of backed off. I wish they would have kept doing what they were doing. Texas Tech had 400 yards of offense, but I think 180 of it was in the fourth quarter.
And what do
You
you
know,
mean when you say that? Can I ask you what do you mean?
well, I mean, they like Coach Prime even mentioned it. Like, Taj Brooks, had most of his yards at the end of the game when they kind of backed off and gave him the running lanes. I wish they would have kept run first, stop the run right up, because they did it all night. I mean, 26 carries, 82 yards is what Taj Brooks had in the fourth, going into the fourth quarter. Then he had 5 carries for 50 some yards in the fourth quarter. So I just wish they kind of would have kept that same aggressiveness in the front.
Sure.
I did think you sort of went prevent a little bit in the fourth quarter, and I understand it, but I think that had they stayed aggressive, the game might have looked a little bit different. The other thing I also say, as far as your clock management, things like that, I agree with you. There's a little bit of that middle finger, but I think you want more breathing room before you do that.
I would agree with you.
Because you also, if you don't have that really good punt from Mark Fassett and that really good play from Arden Walker and Shiloh Sanders, you gave Texas Tech the ball with a minute left and a chance for them to go down and tie the football game. So you played with fire a little bit. It didn't. You were fine, but they play with fire a little bit. And so I wish,
for sure,
be up by 17 or whatever before you do that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it would have been hard to overcome human nature if I'm just being honest with you, with how tense it got in that second half. It got real. There was a point there where I was a little bit worried that we were going to start having some incidents, because I'm telling you, it was one of the most tense on-field atmospheres. It was, by the time it got to the second half, it was nothing like Nebraska. Nebraska started on 10 and the whole atmosphere was 10. The crowd's anger just built here to the point where I was a little bit nervous. I mean, they even warned they were going to eject the student section, because that's and I was thinking about this. That's what Tech does that Folsom doesn't do. The student section is behind the visiting team there. The student section isn't behind the visiting team in Boulder. I think that creates a whole different level of anger and hatred and just that crowd, revving up. So I think it was all kind of like a tinderbox that night. And luckily, by the end of it, I'm telling you this, if they didn't pump the crowd music in, the crowd, I don't think, gets to that, because it was so loud that I think people were getting re-energized by it, which is a good move on their part to a degree, even though I think it's kind of low class. But whatever, Colorado gets out of there with the win. You're the bigger, the better man at the end of the day. And, Texas Tech kind of looked bad on national television in a real way after earning some goodwill the week before.
Yeah, and I think Joey McGuire with his comments was embarrassed with how his team, how the program handled it. Maybe not his team, but how the program. And I thought it was cool that I mean, Shiloh was the one on the video where he was throwing the water bottle back at the fans. That was kind of cool that he sort of had that middle finger moment when he picked up the fumble and sealed the deal with that one. And Shiloh needed that in a lot of ways, but especially that night, I think, because it was kind of like, look, man, you've been throwing stuff at me all night. Here you go. Here's your touchdown, and goodbye. So I thought that was a good, cool moment for him. And what a weekend for the Sanders, right? Shedeur gets Big 12 Offensive Player of the Week. So good game overall. There was things you can nitpick with, and we'll do that a little bit, but good game overall. The Buffs won a big one that they needed.
Yeah, the other thing I want to give credit for is Coach Prime for handling the press conference. I wouldn't have been that classy in that moment, considering what we just went through. And he kept it really classy because I think he respects Coach McGuire. Had that been somewhere else, I think maybe that gets a little even more turned up a notch. Not to mention, they were going after the refs. And I think it's important that we do bring this up, because you and I are two guys that never talk really about officiating. By and large, there's missed calls every game. It happens every time a football game is played. Sometimes they're bad. Sometimes they cost you the game. That, crap happens. Okay. That's what happens here. And so I think the point is that it wasn't just the comment that the ref made, and I think we should touch on that. It was the blatant
mention the comment. Mention the comment.
Yeah, we will. But I kind of want to start with the offensive pass interference. That wasn't why it got to that level, because not only are you getting pelted with stuff from behind and water bottles and beer cans and all this, now you're getting screwed out onto the field because of obvious violations, and they're not getting penalized. So Coach Prime had every right to lose it the way he did. I haven't seen him lose it since he's gotten here, on
Yeah.
an official like he did on this clown
Right. Yeah.
who was directly one of the guys who did not throw the flag on two of the OPIs. And you go back and you watch the tape, which I have.
Yeah.
They're basketballs. They're running pick and roll. I'm
Yeah.
just saying it. They're setting a
Right.
flare screen. It's ridiculous. So I totally understand why it got there. And
Right.
then after all that, okay, after all that, to go to the officials and say we are having water bottles and beer cans thrown at us, and for the official to turn around and say, well, your players are blowing kisses at them every time you score. In my opinion, that is grounds for a minimum a suspension, because if in your opinion that is in any world equivalent to one another, then in my honest opinion, you're really not deserving of being an official at this level,
Right.
because you can't judge what is fair and what is safe. That is a direct dereliction of duty
Right.
in
Yeah.
controlling the crowd. And as we brought up before, if the crowd is not penalized in that situation, what other recourse? When ever have you heard a coach hop on a microphone or anybody and say, PA announcer, please, fans, stop throwing things into the crowd?
Yeah.
What do people do, Brian? What do people do?
Throw more.
Boo and
Yeah.
throw more. That's
Yeah.
not how you do it. You throw the flag and go, we just got a flag, so knock it off. That's
Yeah.
the only way to do it. Sorry, you shouldn't
Yeah.
have a tradition where you throw crap onto the field. I Coach Prime can't say this stuff, so I feel like it's important that we say this because we were there. You and I cover football for a long time. You've done it
Mm-hmm.
longer than I have. I've never seen that before. It should not be allowed to take place again. There's no place for it. I'm good with tradition, but the level of disrespect that the crowd, in my opinion, showed towards the opposing team crossed the line, and there was no reprimanding of it by the officiating crew, whose
Yeah.
job it is to keep it under control, and they failed. And that crew should face repercussions for that. And it's
Yeah.
not Mark Harlan, Utah's athletic director, coming out and say that he's disgusted in the professionalism because there was a questionable call. This
Yeah.
wasn't a questionable call. This was a pattern all night of an unsafe environment that was allowed to get out of hands by incompetent officiating, and Brett Yormark should be addressing this. I want to get on the record with saying that, because this is a small thing to clean up. You want to have a good reputation in your brand new league, you clean this crap up and you hold officials accountable too. That's what the fans want. That's what the NFL's got a real problem with it. I'm sorry, I know I'm ranting, but we talk about the NFL, at least us NFL fans do. The last couple of years, it hasn't been a great product. A big part of the problem is officials aren't held accountable. And if you want integrity in your sport, you've got to do that. And with instances like that, it's just a no-brainer.
Yeah, well, and that wasn't all. That officiating crew just had a bad night. I mean, how many times the officiating crew, the clock operator, how many times did he have to get on the microphone and say, please reset the clock to this? Okay. And there was another one, Matt. I don't know if you know, this benefited the Buffs actually, but early third quarter, okay, first drive. I don't know if you noticed this. Okay. When the Buffs finish it, Shador scores on the touchdown run, right? So they have 1st and 10 at the 17. Shador throws incomplete. 2nd and 10 at the 17. He does the little flip to Savell Smalls,
Right.
and it's a 9-yard gain. They spot the ball.
What time in the game is this?
What was the first drive of the third quarter?
Okay.
So
I'm just trying to remember, just jog my memory. Okay.
Yeah,
I remember now. Yeah.
So
remember the Patrick Mahomes-esque flip to Smalls. Yeah.
Yeah. So it doesn't matter what happened, but it was a 1st and 10 at the 17, right? It's a 9-yard pass to Savell.
Okay.
They mark it at the 8-yard line. So it should be 3rd and 1, right?
Is that what happened?
They gave him a first down. They gave him 1st and goal on a 9-yard play. So now they had 1st and goal at the 8. If you look at the official stats, they marked the ball at the 7-yard line on the official stats because they had to do that in their program for it to be a first down.
And I swear to God, I thought I missed a play.
No, you didn't.
I thought I was talking to somebody and missed a play, and I turned around and it was first down, and I was like, I must have missed them pick that up on the ground. I swear to you, up until this point, I thought I had missed a play.
I'm looking at the official box here. They have Shador with a 7-yard touchdown run. That ball was snapped right at the 8-yard line.
Wow.
Because they had to
missed it down and got the snap. Adam came down and told me that the snap, the placement was spots were off all night long.
Oh, it was terrible. So that one, yeah, I'm looking at looking at here. They had to mark it. They had to change the stats
Yeah.
to call it a 10-yard pass, but the ball was marked at the 8-yard line. So they gave them a first down and goal. And it didn't matter because he scored. But my point is just the
Yeah.
officiating, how
Yeah.
bad it was. That was just another example. It was bad all night long. And it was, yeah, that
Not
was
you got
not
to address it. You got to
that
got
was
to be
not, but
addressed.
the bigger issue, you have bad officiating, you have
Yeah.
certain calls in every game, but the whole scope of everything, main thing being what you were talking about before, made it bad. But the bottom line, Matt, let's move on from that one because the bottom
Yep.
line is the Buffs don't have to go back to Lubbock, and we don't have to worry about that situation. That's one
Thank
for
God.
Texas Tech and the Big 12 to worry about when Tech is home again. I don't know
Yeah.
when that is, but I'm sure they have at least
Who
one more home game,
cares?
so they better address that.
Yeah.
But yeah, Buff wise, one other player I want to give a shout out to that I mentioned on Twitter a little bit ago before we did this, Tyler Brown.
Okay.
Okay. Last week, he spent a good chunk of his week practicing on defense, right?
Yeah. Yeah. Well,
Because
Coach
they
Prime
were,
made him a two-way player. Yeah.
yeah, made him a two-way player
Because he hasn't been
because,
getting as many snaps on offense,
yeah,
I think.
he's been
Yeah.
playing about 40 some percent of the snaps because of the guard rotation. And it made total sense because he's seemed like he was sort of becoming the odd man out in that rotation in some ways. And Shane Cokes was hurt.
I
And
think that was
so
the biggest part of that.
yes,
But
that was
yeah.
the biggest part
Yeah.
of it.
Yeah.
But really Tyler had he had been playing less and less snaps, right? In
Mm-hmm.
fact, he did not start the previous game against Cincinnati. And so it was kind of like, okay, this makes sense, I guess, but it's too bad for Tyler that, you know, that he's having to do this. But then he goes out this week, doesn't play any defense. He plays all but 8 snaps on offense, and he had the best pass blocking grade of anybody by CU all season.
Wow. Well, I mean, you know how I feel about PFF, so I feel like
I
if
know.
I,
I
I don't want
understand
to
that.
give him two. It's just because of my own personal. I don't know who's making these grades,
It
so
doesn't
that's
matter.
awesome.
I
He
totally
played
agree
well.
with you.
That's what matters.
All I'm saying, yeah, I totally agree with you. I take
Yeah.
the ratings with a grain of salt, but I will say this: it's the same people grading every game. So regardless, whatever the scale is, Tyler, they said
Could
Tyler.
still be a moron. Even if he's doing every game,
The
it could.
point
You know
is,
what I mean? That's
Tyler
what I'm
had a
saying.
really good game.
Yeah. Yeah.
In a I wouldn't say I don't know if
I'm
it's an
just
adverse
teasing.
situation, but he bounced back. I think, and he's done a really good job. He played a really good game the other night, so I got to
I love
shout
Tyler.
out to him. So yeah, one of the best people around,
Easily.
and so great game for him. So
That whole
bottom,
offensive line, I thought played
oh
well.
they played really well. Yeah,
I mean, and by the way, can we talk about this while we're on the offensive line for a second? Well, we got two things to talk about, and they both came from IMG Academy. I
yeah,
think we should probably start with Cash Cleveland because of how big
yeah,
he stepped up.
yeah.
What a moment. A freshman walk
Right.
on to come in. I was watching him in the well off, standing there with Jordan Seaton, who's the number one offensive lineman in the country. Happened to be, happened to play with him. I think that's besides the point, though, right? It's, hey, that's Jordan Seaton. There's Shador. There's Travis Hunter. And here comes a freshman walk on to play center for this team. That takes some balls, Brian. It takes some chutzpah to be able to step in there
Yeah.
and do it the way he did it. And I don't know what's going to happen there moving forward. I don't understand what the issue is with Zelinskis right now and why that keeps occurring. I
Mhm.
think Hank's a great kid, and he's actually played some pretty good football this year. So it's
Yeah.
unfortunate, I think, that happened. But you have to, I mean, you put it out there. They won on the road 41-27, starting two freshman offensive linemen, let alone one of them being a freshman walk-on.
40% of their offensive line the other night was playing at IMG Academy last year.
That's a IMG should put that on a poster and send that out,
Absolutely.
middle schools across the country.
But
Yeah.
how insane is that? Not only do you, I don't care who you're beating. I mean, if it's impressive if you beat anybody, but to do
Yeah.
that on the road in a big game, arguably your biggest game in November, or maybe arguably your biggest game to that point of the season, and you've got two true freshmen out there, one of them a walk on, and you protect Shador like you did. That was a pretty good job. I mean, I think he was sacked 3 times, but even Coach Prime mentioned at least one was on him,
Yeah.
maybe a couple of them. So yeah, great job, Cash Cleveland.
I'd like to
Cash
get
Cleveland.
I'd like to get Cash on Tuesday for the presser. Shador teased us with how charismatic he is. I would hope that if anybody listens to this, they send Cash up there Tuesday if they feel like he's ready.
Yeah. Well, the other guy I'd like to see is Nakai Hill Green, who
That
is
too.
an absolute beast.
He's a monster. But before we leave the offensive line, Jordan Seaton, just a freshman All-American or a flat-out All-American?
He's made. I don't know if he's all American, first team All American. I don't know if he's the best left tackle in the country.
He's in the conversation.
He's
Second
in the
team.
conversation, maybe.
I mean, I feel like every time if you want to bring up PFF, every time we see a PFF number, it's like Jordan
Yeah,
Sneaton didn't allow Shador to get sneezed on tonight.
yeah,
I mean, it's like nobody came within 10 yards of Shador.
yeah.
I I watch
And I don't
him.
know who's
Nobody
better. I
gets
just know
past him.
there's some really good ones out there. I don't know who would be better, but
In the running, I would say.
in the running, yeah. I mean,
In the running. So I just want to make sure that that's on the record. I mean, I'd consider him at that level right now.
yeah.
I mean, I you know what I feel about him. I would start stitching the gold jacket right now if I
I
could.
would say, yeah, his first half of the season, I would not say was All American. His first month or so, the last month and
Okay.
a half,
I mean, he's
probably.
a true freshman.
True
So,
freshman.
yeah,
That's my point. And
pretty damn good
I'm not
still first half of the
criticizing
month.
that. I'm just saying I'm not criticizing that. Just a lot of true freshmen are not even ready to play.
Yeah, but it
And
wasn't even like he was giving up sacks. I just think he's more sound
right, right,
now.
right.
You
And
know what I mean?
I don't remember the last time he was penalized either, because he was
He did.
penalized.
I think he was the other night. I think he had a holding
Did he have one the other night?
against
Okay.
Texas Tech because I remember
Okay.
hearing it. Actually, I think it might have been later in the game because I remember hearing it, and I think Adam and I were sitting next to each other, and I went, "Wow, you don't hear that one very often.
Yeah.
That is one you don't hear
He
very
had a
often."
few early in the season, but I don't remember. And maybe he did have one, but I don't remember a whole lot of penalties in recent weeks.
Yeah,
He's playing really well, and
that's my point. I
so
think
I'm
he
not
deserves credit.
criticizing. I'm just saying a lot of true freshmen the first month of their college career
Yeah, yeah.
would it'd be unfair to say he even struggled, but would have some bumps in the road. He had some, but he's playing really well right now. So
You talked
um
about Nikai Hill Green. Can you? I
yeah,
didn't mean to interrupt you before that. Go ahead.
that's good. I just that guy is impressing me, week after week, and the way he and Levante Bentley,
Yeah.
just the way they lay the wood, and
Mm-hmm.
I mean they were all over Taj Brooks the other night, and Cam Silman Craig was at times too. Chidozie and Wonko was as well. Amari McNeil was unbelievable the other night. But Nikai Hill Green, I hope I never get hit by him, because I don't think I will. But I hope I never do, because
Don't
I
piss
think
him
that would
off.
hurt really bad.
Yeah.
He
Yeah.
just man, he hits hard.
It was interesting. I was listening to Mark Johnson and Coach Barnett doing their little, we all do our little field breakdowns. Coach Barnett called him defensive MVP, which I
Well,
thought was high
yeah,
praise. And considering the level Cameron Silman Craig has played at this year, because I would
yeah,
consider Cam my defensive MVP. But if you said it's Nikai Hill Green, how about this? And knock on wood. But you and I were sitting there in the spring going, who the hell is going to play the other linebacker? We love, as much as you and I both love Trevor. Trevor's
yeah,
a great guy, a great young man. Until they like bulk him up significantly, and even then, I'm not sure that you can enter a year in the Big 12 with him as your plan for starting linebacker. It's not his natural position, and that's
yeah,
okay. That's just my personal belief, and it's nothing against Trevor. He's made some big time plays, and I think he could get better at it. Okay, but for this year, there was no transition time to be
right,
made to get his
yeah,
body ready. So the point was, is we didn't know. And Hill Green comes in out of Charlotte doing what he did there, coming from Michigan. And the first time I spoke to him, and you had interviewed him prior to the first time I
hmm
met him, I was like, "Oh, that's what you're looking for out of the transfer portal. Guys
yeah,
like him, guys like Shane Cokes. You know
yep,
what I mean?
hmm
Those type of guys who they've got it up here, they've got it upstairs. They know what it takes to play ball at this level and to come to work every day and be relentless.
yeah,
Now, the way Nakai has affected everything has put him firmly on NFL radars, and I'll be interested to see what kind of buzz, maybe like a fifth rounder, maybe something like that. Maybe I mean inside
yeah,
linebacker, it just depends, but I would say at least a fifth right now
maybe, yeah.
in that ballpark.
He's he and Levante Bentley are playing their way into the draft, in my opinion. And Nakai, it's crazy because like Cam last year, Cam didn't start the opener last year. An injury gets him in there, and then he
Yeah.
goes out and balls out. It wasn't an injury this year. It was, Nakai doesn't start the season though, and then they make the switch, and he's been balling out ever since. So, yeah, I could see the argument for him being defensive player of the year for this team. I think Cam, first half of the season, I would have said Cam. But as the season goes along, I think Nakai has been probably their most consistent
Mm,
guy. Um, but Cam's
second
right up
most,
there. You think behind
maybe
Cam?
third most. Well, there's a guy who plays corner who's pretty damn good too.
Well, yeah.
Oh
That
yeah,
guy
yeah,
too.
yeah. Well, the Heisman, whatever.
We say, okay, let me just qualify.
I
I'm
knew what you
saying all
meant.
this
I knew
stuff
what you meant.
aside from Travis.
I knew what you meant. I still had to
We
give you
know
the credit
Travis is
for
the
it.
best defensive player on the field, and
Yeah.
but when you talk about most valuable,
Mm-hmm.
I would give it to Nakai because of the fact that there's so many other good corners on this team, and we saw it against Arizona. Travis cannot play corner, and they're still okay.
Yes. I
If
mean, think about where they are this year if he goes down compared to where they were last year by this
yeah.
time. I mean,
If
they're so much better suited.
if Nakai doesn't play linebacker right now, I don't know if they're screwed, but they're in a little bit of trouble.
Well, let's not even talk about it then. How's that
Yeah.
sound?
So
Yeah.
that's why I would say he's maybe most valuable.
I mean, he's right. Like I said, he's firmly in the conversation.
Yeah.
And we brought up corners, the guys who probably don't get enough talk. DJ McKinney played that game banged up and was really good, I thought. Preston Hodge got burned on the one by Kelly. I think early he was in coverage there where he kind of busted it out on the first drive. But outside of that, Kelly had 100 yards, but I barely noticed him all day.
Right. Yeah. He had a couple big ones late. Only the second, by the way, they've only given up 400-yard games rushing and receiving all season. And
Giddens, Brooks.
Giddens and the K-State receiver. So that night. And then Brooks and
Jace Brown. I think that's what
I think it was Jace Brown. And then it was Brooks and
wow,
Kelly the other night. So
I mean
they gave up 14 last year.
That's what I was just about to say. Think about what that was last year.
Yeah.
And it
was week in, week out.
It is unbelievable. One of these shows, because they deserve it, let's go through and you and I put the numbers together side by side of what they did last year and maybe next week and what they've done this year to really highlight the difference because they've earned that respect as far as like numerically for us to highlight it. Right. Robert Livingston, Vincent Dancy, Warren Sapp, Damian Lewis, Andre Hart, Kevin Mathis, and the rest of the support staff and coaching staff. George Hilo probably doesn't get mentioned enough, but has become a really important part of this coaching staff. They've got something there, and it's a huge reason. And I would honestly say, behind Shedeur, it is the biggest reason they are where they are.
Oh, without question. I mean, here's just one number. The biggest number right now is they gave up 34.8 points a game last year. It's 22.6 right now. That's the big reason.
Say that one more
time. They gave up 34.8 points per game last year, and they're giving up 22.6 right now.
You couldn't have told me before the year that there. You want to know something I didn't believe? I didn't believe that was going to. All right, fans who are always saying that we're closet haters. You want to know something that I didn't believe that they could do that in a year? That is wicked impressive. That's got to be the best margin year over year in the country, not even remotely close.
Yeah. I want to make sure I was right on that. It was 34.8. So yeah, that's a 12.2 point difference right now. I thought coming into the year, I thought they'd be better. I thought if you can knock a touchdown off of what they did last year, which is still a lot, that this team was going to win a lot of games, make that from 35 a game to 28 a game.
Yeah.
That'd be huge. They're down to 20, not even 23 points a game. And that average went up last week because they gave up 27 to Texas Tech. So what they're doing right now is phenomenal. And I was
going to say the one. Yeah, well, the last thing on that, I think the one part of that, the kind of external factor, I was definitely wrong about the Big 12 at the beginning of the year. I think you probably were too. We were kind of on the same page that
everybody was. Yeah.
Well, even though everybody was saying this isn't a great conference, at least that most people were saying it's not a great conference. You and I were like, I don't know, not so fast. Dioli Corso, not so fast, my friends. Turns out, no, it's really not a great conference. Outside of Shedeur, who would you take for quarterback outside of Shedeur if you could pick in the conference? Reffens, Rowan Gardner, who's in Whatzer at BYU? What's his name? Reffensberger?
Retzlaff.
Retzlaff. That's the one.
Yeah, I mean, I'm looking. We haven't seen TCU. I'm looking at the stats right now. Josh Hoover is actually throwing for more yards per game than Shedeur. Rocco Becht has been pretty solid.
Yeah,
I'm not saying I would take. I'm not saying I would take him over Shador. I'm
My
just
point
saying,
is that nobody's in his area code. It is the
oh
gap
yeah,
between him and everyone else in the
right,
conference
right,
is
right,
the
right,
Grand freaking Canyon,
right.
okay? And I would even go on to say the gap between him and everyone else in the country, except Cam Ward's like down here and then everybody else is here,
Well,
but he is
Dylan Gabriel.
yeah, okay. And you know what?
Yeah,
Based upon the way Bo Nix has played to start his NFL career, you definitely can't write him off because as much as we don't like Lanning, he's proven to be a damn good football coach and that
yeah,
system works. And they've rehabbed both Nix and remember, Gabriel needed to be rehabbed too. It
yeah,
wasn't a slam dunk that he was going to be like, a Heisman candidate this year. What they've done up in Eugene is impressive. So they do deserve their flowers for
yeah.
sure.
Just look at. I don't know who would be second team all conference quarterback in the Big 12. Hoover, Sorsby, as far as the highest rated behind Shador. Hoover, Sorsby, Rocco Becht, Sawyer Robinson are the next four. You'd probably have you'd
Ugh.
probably go Jake Retzlaff from
Ugh.
BYU as second team
You
quarterback
have to. You have
right,
to.
because of he's been the heart and
Ugh.
soul of that team. But
Well,
yeah,
maybe we would have thought Cam Rising would have factored in there had he ever
yeah,
played.
I would have put Rising. I mean, Jalen Daniels was supposed to be. I mean, Avery Johnson was supposed to be really good
Oh,
as well.
Jalen Daniels. I'm sorry. Yes, Jalen Daniels. Yes.
Yeah, from
Well, they still
Kansas.
got to deal with
Yeah,
him. So
yeah, they still got to deal with him. So, let's move on to this week. You were talking about the defense giving up only 22.6. Now they're playing a Utah team that they can't get to 22 points. Yeah, there's now watch them have 30 this week, but they stink on offense without Cam Rising. Literally stink. Like there's a stench coming over the mountain from Salt Lake City, and that's the Utah offense right now. That's I don't usually say things like that, but last 5 weeks, Matt, 14.2
I'm rubbing
points a
off on
game.
you. Yeah. What'd you say?
14.2 points a game the last 5 weeks.
Mm, mm. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
tough sledding. It's tough sledding. I've watched. I mean,
Yeah.
outside of Bernard, is Singer hurt?
No, he played the other night.
Oh, yeah. Well, they just don't have a quarterback that can really get him the ball
No.
consistently.
Yeah.
So the other part of this is we say all that, and they should have beaten BYU. They would
Yeah.
have beaten BYU. They would have. And
Yeah.
why? Because their defensive front is nasty.
Oh
And
yeah. Mhm.
Colorado better be prepared. Utah, here's the one thing, and I think this is where if I'm the Buffs, I don't think they'll get caught up in it. It's important to address though. Even though you're going to be ranked higher than 20th, you may even be a top 15 team per the CFP this week. I don't know how it shakes out. We find out what tomorrow night?
Yeah.
It could be in that
I'm gonna say
ballpark.
17, yeah.
Okay.
17,
All
18.
right.
Yeah.
Well, you're going to be a top 20. Okay.
Yeah.
You already are, but you're going to be firmly inside of
Yeah.
it now.
Mm-hmm.
The point is that now your target gets even bigger now. It doesn't shrink, and you can't automatically just go, oh, well, we're in the top 15. People are going to
Right.
lay down. And I don't think CU will, but this is the time to fine tune everything. So
Yeah.
as a coach, this is when maybe you're more of an aloha to your players and you're on them more so that they do clean up the details. Because if Colorado is going to go to the college football playoff, here's what I know. And this is something I wanted to bring up. In my opinion, in every sport, your weaknesses always show when you get to the postseason.
Yeah.
Always. I don't care what it is, they'll always come out in some way, shape, or form.
Yep.
To me, Colorado's most glaring weakness, their special teams unit right now.
Yeah.
All across the board is a
Yep.
significant problem. They haven't been in a situation where they've needed a 50-yarder to win. Now they needed a
Right.
47-yarder and Mata
You
got
got it.
48 of it, right?
Yeah.
My point is that like
47 and a half.
but here's the other part, right? And even the other day, you give up a couple of massive breakdowns, kick return coverage. You've got experienced guys playing on special teams. Breakdowns like that, even if you're not kicking the ball out of the end zone, should not be happening.
Yeah.
One thing that we really don't address is that the guy who was responsible for their special teams last year, it wasn't great last year either, by the way. Let's just clarify that, okay? They haven't really nailed this position down yet.
Right.
Left at the beginning of the year. And then, as I understand it, those responsibilities in part were kind of assumed by several people, but I believe it's Tommy Robinson right now. Does
Right.
he have the official title?
Well, he's not a special teams coordinator. He's like quality control.
Okay.
But what I was told at that time when Trevor was no longer here
Yeah.
was that Tommy would be in charge of that and sort of that special team, like Trevor was. He was a quality control guy in charge of the special teams.
I would say, look, I know everybody has experience. Something isn't being done right.
Right.
Okay. I don't know what it is, and I'm not blaming anybody, but we can all see week in and week out all year long. It's not just the kickoff because some kid
Yeah.
doesn't have a leg for it. Something is not being done right. Something's not being taught right. The message isn't sinking in.
Yeah.
If I were looking at Coach Prime and asking him, you said last year when the offensive line isn't getting the job done, here's the picture. I'm going to go get a new lineman and paint it perfectly. I'm genuinely curious to know how he feels about where they're at with special teams. I
Yeah.
know that he played a lot of it and he knows special teams really well. He's got a lot on his plate. And I know other guys do, and everybody's
Well, Tommy
contributing.
Robinson was his special teams
Well,
coach
that's kind of what I'm
when he
saying.
played.
Something
Yeah.
ain't working. So I'm not blaming him. I want to make sure
Yeah.
everybody comes off. I don't know what's going on behind the scenes. So it would be irresponsible for me to go fire him or something like
Right.
that.
Right.
I'm
Right. Yeah.
just saying, my eyes tell me something ain't right. Why is that? And let's address it now because,
Yeah.
Brian, they've gotten lucky against Baylor. It could have burned them and it didn't. The
Yep.
other night, it could have burned them and it didn't.
It did early.
It did early, Brian.
Yep.
It sure as hell did early. And if
Yep.
they get to the college football playoff and you've got these issues, guess what it's going to do in the playoff?
Yeah.
You may not even have to get that far. You may just get to the Big 12 title game because when the lights get
Well,
brighter and the pressure kicks on, those are tough moments. Those are important moments. Colorado's got to spend the next
yeah.
few weeks figuring out what the heck is going on with special teams because those are problems that if Travis Hunter and Shador Sanders have a team, they're leading a team that is capable of winning games late in the year in the postseason, and that burns you.
Yeah.
Guess who's going to be kicking themselves? It's not Travis Hunter and Shador
Right.
Sanders. It's going to be the coaching staff
Yeah.
because that didn't get addressed.
The
So
one
they got to figure it out.
the one unit where you don't have either of those guys on the field.
Well, Travis did play some special teams.
True.
En route to playing 170 snaps per
But
PFF. Are you kidding?
He's not on the kickoff return unit. So I'm looking at kickoff returns. CU is 14th in the Big 12.
That's
And
unacceptable.
and the only one they only have 15 lists for some reason, but the only
Is
one
that
worse
returns, you said?
on opponent returns.
Oh, opponent returns.
Yeah,
well,
on average yards they give up. The only one worse, they only
was
have
gonna say,
15
who's
listed,
worse?
is Utah. But them and Utah are the only ones that have given up a touchdown this
Really?
year.
Utah's worse?
Yeah.
Wow.
Utah's usually pretty salty on special teams. So
I know. That's why I'm really surprised. And Becker's got a leg. So
yeah,
is he even kicking off for them? I don't know if he is.
I assume so. Nobody gives up more returns per game than Colorado.
Well, that's true because they can't get it into the
They
end
can't
zone,
get in the
and
end
you
zone.
have no choice.
Right. Yeah.
I did think the pooch kick worked better. I don't know what you do. Maybe you try to squib the hell out of it and just
Yeah.
and if it goes out of bounds, that's fine. And you just allow guys to, some more time to get down there. The pooch worked out because everybody swarmed really well. Even I would not rely on that though. Every time they do that, it scares the hell out of me because it's just,
Yeah.
I know it's not as much time, but it makes me nervous. So that is something they have to figure out. And I felt like it needed to be said. Coach Prime the other day talked about be critical where you deserve to be. And he has said many times, we can't figure it out. Try something different.
Well,
you got to try something different.
It's sort of crazy that they went to Mata to even kick off because he's not a kickoff guy. He didn't even do it at Jackson State. So the fact that Mata's doing really well on field goals, but they resorted to going to Mata because nobody else can do this, and they were just trying something. They've had 5 different guys kick off this year.
That's can I tell you that's kind of embarrassing.
That's kind of embarrassing. I don't know if it's a record, but they've had 5 different guys kick off at some point this year. And
the picture that needs to be painted perfectly is that has to get resolved next year.
And I will say this: outside of the return by Baylor, it was Baylor that had the kickoff return, right? For touchdown. Yeah. Outside of that one,
did they house it, or I thought it was just a couple of big ones? It might have been a house call in that game.
Yeah, because CU and Utah are the only ones that have given up a touchdown.
Okay.
I think it was Baylor.
Okay.
Outside of that one play, though, they were doing a good job with Feely.
Yeah, it was.
He was the most consistent in getting touchbacks, but the average starting field position was inside the 25. So they were doing a good job other than that one kick. So I don't know. They got to figure that out for sure.
Even Feely's, and Feely tore everything up in that leg, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah, he did. Yeah, but even he was not consistent with it.
No.
So yeah, no. It's crazy.
But that's kind of what I'm saying is next year, like if there's a couple positions, by the way, and while we're on the topic, a couple positions that next year are non-negotiable, you got to go get dudes. For me, kicker and running back. We didn't talk about the running game very much because they got the win. I didn't think they stuck with it maybe the way they should have down the stretch. Now, that being said, Augustive, he's earned the running back one spot for me. However, like, he's got to learn how to hit his next gear. We haven't seen
Yeah.
him hit his next gear yet, and
Right.
that's a problem. Dallin for me is, Dallin. I think those guys, quite frankly, and not being rude, I think those guys are kind of like a dime a dozen.
Yeah.
And that's a position where you're not going to have Shador next year. Next year's team, and while we're on this, has to be built around good defense and running the hell out of the football, especially
Yeah.
if Juju Lewis does end up committing. And if you're going to start a freshman, your number one plan better be great running game next year, more than it is 5-star wide receivers, because he's a freshman. Like, I mean, you're going to
Yeah.
have those guys. You've got to be able to run the hell out of the football next year. And in my opinion, Augustive should be a part of that rotation moving forward, I think, but that should be a priority. And I don't know why they haven't been able to identify the right guys or lock down the real, like, game breakers. And this is no offense to anybody. I do believe Isaiah Augustive can get there. I need
Yeah.
to share these hard truths, okay? If you want to get to that level, you need some dudes who are special. And if next year you're going with a freshman quarterback, you better bring in some dudes who can tote it. That's all I wanted to say.
Yeah. Well, I want to move on to Utah, but I will say this. I'd be stunned if they turn this thing over to a 17-year-old freshman. I think they're going to get somebody in the transfer portal. We can talk about that another time. I'd be stunned if they don't go out and get a veteran quarterback in the transfer portal and let Juju learn for a year. That I'd be surprised. So, but let's move on to Utah, Matt, because they got a big one. And if you look at the standings, and to some of those, maybe to some fans or maybe new to Colorado, they may not understand looking at this why Utah would be a big one. Utah has kicked the crap out of them for a number of years now. And Utah's still I was saying how their offense stinks. Their defense is not. They got the number one defense in the Big 12, and they're legit. They have not allowed more than 27 points in the game all year, and that was only once. That's who was it? Arizona State beat them 27-19. Other than that, every other team they've held below to 23 or less. So teams can't score on this team. I think CU will. I would pencil in CU for 27 plus, but this is not going to be an easy game.
No. And I got some thoughts here too. I'm watching the end of this BYU game, and Utah is all over Raffensperger.
Ratzlaff.
Whatever. Yeah, Ratzlaff. That's it. Yeah, Ratzlaff. That's it. Oh, it's like Kramer. Kitzmiller. That's the one.
Yeah.
So they were all over him. I mean, pressure, exotic blitzes. They're sending linebackers. They're sending safeties. Their D-line is no joke. We talked about evolving and refining with Pat Shurmur. Coming out of the second bye week, I could definitely see that there were some different things they were trying to do. The beginning of that game, they kind of went more to some downfield stuff, I think, because they thought they could maybe take advantage of a Texas Tech secondary that had some injuries and really wasn't all that great. I think that was the game plan. Was, hey, maybe some of the stuff we haven't been able to hit this year, we're going to be able to get, and it just didn't work out. It didn't work out. And when they reverted back to the quick game, it was a lot of bubbles. It was a lot of just getting rid of it right away.
Yeah.
It worked because that's how good Colorado's skill players are. But that was also, Brian, you could have knocked me over with the feather, my friend, when I saw what their third down conversion number was the other night.
The Buffs, how bad it was?
2 of 13.
Yeah.
Brian, it's a miracle that you won a game going 2 of 13.
That's because they didn't get the third down.
But partially, but when they did, they didn't convert that many times.
Yeah.
That's insane to win a game like that. Unless you're, again, to your point, hitting big shot after big shot, which they weren't. And yes, they weren't getting there, but that's a horrific number. I mean, you should feel luck to score 41 and do that is impressive. Okay. So
one was on, and one of the conversions, I believe, was the roughing the passer penalty, which was not roughing the passer, but
was that factored into that?
Yeah, that's one of the conversions.
Holy cow. Okay, so this is kind of what this builds into what I'm talking about. They were disjointed because I felt like, even though we talked about evolving and refining, the way I see that concept is evolving and refining in what you do well. And then, we're going to add a little bit, sprinkle in a little bit of other stuff. But the best this offense is when they're tight formations and they're going quickly. Oh, and they're not necessarily quickly tempo-wise, but they're going quick game. Like all we're trying all we're trying to do is we're using a scalpel instead of a hammer. That's when this Colorado offense, in my opinion, is at its best, because Shador is a threat to run. You're quick with the ball, inside slants. We didn't see a ton of that. I know there was some different things that Tech was doing to kind of crowd some things and throw different looks at Shador because they're trying to game him, but that's where they're at their best.
Yeah.
That's what they're at their best. That's their bread and butter, is the quick game, tight formation. Here we go. Let Shador go. And we're going to set up the run with the pass with Augustive. That's it. We found it. I'm not going to talk about what you don't do well. I want to talk about what you do well. I said do. Anyway, the point is that that's a stupid Family Guy joke. Sorry about that. Every time I see them struggle, I think you're making it just a little bit too hard on yourselves. You need some formational variety. You need to be able to spread the boundary. You want to do some of that stuff. But quite frankly, they're not good at that unless they unlock the other stuff. I think we have enough of a sample size to see that now. If I were the Buffs to avoid slow starts, I would have a name for it, like my go-go package or something like that. But this is what we're going to do when we know we need a spark plug. We're getting into this. And then if teams start nailing us down here when everybody's up close, we're going to beat the hell out of you up top. That's when they're at the best. And I want to see more of that moving forward. And I think that's how you avoid slow starts. And we know if the Buffs start fast, it's over.
It's over. But we also know if they start slow,
it
could be okay.
Yeah, but this team can beat the hell out of somebody if you jump on them early. We just haven't really seen it yet because they haven't been great in second halves.
I also think, it's funny. It almost feels cliche that we talk about every week. Well, they need a fast start. They need a fast start. This is one of those games that I look at and say, they don't need a fast start, because I don't think Utah's going to jump on you and, put you in a 13-0 hole, or a bigger hole than that. I just don't think they're capable of that. I also think, I'm looking at Utah's schedule. They are very good defensively. You have to give them a lot of credit. But we were just talking about how the gap between Shador and everybody else in the Big 12, quarterback-wise, is massive. Okay, they've played Big 12 teams in all but 2 of their games. And then the other 2 were Southern Utah and Utah State. They have not played a quarterback like Shador or anywhere near like Shador yet this year. And so I feel a lot more confident
like they're going to face on Saturday,
in an environment like that. Right. Yeah. But regardless of the environment, they have not seen that yet. And then, of course, they haven't seen the Travis Hunter. They haven't seen the receivers. Utah, they're the number 1 defense in the Big 12. They haven't given up more than 27. I think that changes this week because I don't think they've seen anybody like this.
This is why I say it's the quick game, is because of the pressures that they're going to have. They're going to have to get desperate, and they're going to have to send guys, which is why I'm not even allowing that to happen. That's why quick game, we're getting a ball out. We're going to bring everybody in tight, so you guys have to figure out a bunch of pre-snap motion in this one. Like, this is the one where we're going to nickel and dime you to death, and once we do, we're going to kind of dance on your dead corpse. You know what I mean? Like, that's how you do it with Utah, who's a team that you just have to beat the soul out of them early. And if you do that, the defense will still fight. They're not going to lay down.
Yeah.
But you can take away this offense's will early. And if they get in front, Colorado's pass rushers have been eating lately. I think this offensive line for Utah is susceptible. Everybody's been getting on me. Matt, you always got close games. Guess who thought the line should be about double what it was when it came out? This guy. I put on social media, if I were handicapping this game, I'd have it about 17.5. My opinion. I'm just telling you, that's how bullish I am that they smoke the Utes on Saturday.
Yeah.
And it's not being cocky. It's believing in what they have put together here. And until I believed, I didn't want to come out and say that because you never know what could happen. I don't care now. If they lose, that's on them. I believe that they are the team capable of beating this team by multiple scores. I think 10 is almost an insult to them, and they should approach it that way and look to deliver that kind of beating. That's honestly what my messaging is this week.
I'll say this too, that I think for those who don't know the BYU-Utah rivalry, that is a really intense, bitter rivalry. I believe that Utah had a bye week before that.
Yep.
They're not having a very good season, right? We know this. They're 4-4. They'd lost 4 in a row. I believe that's a team that probably went all in. They had 2 weeks to prepare for their biggest rival. That was their Super Bowl. That was their opportunity to flip their season. Now they're not going to win the conference. I know that, but to flip their season and finish strong.
Yeah.
They didn't win that game.
Yeah.
Right. I think that it's better for CU that they didn't win that game. I think that if Utah wins that game, makes them 5-4,
Yeah,
and they have a chance to come in here to
agreed.
get bowl eligible and have a strong November, I think that would have been. I would have disagreed with you on that. I think I don't know. I have a lot of respect for Whittingham and that program,
So do I.
but I will say this: the fact that they went all out and then still lost that game, Utah can still get bowl eligible, but what are they playing for at this point, in my opinion? And you just lost another. Brant Keithy just went out for the year. That's another one. Man, unfortunate for that guy, by the way.
I
That's one
know.
of the best players I've seen over the number of years, over the last several years. That he just has been snake bitten by injuries. Um, he's he was an NFL tight end, and he might still be, but he was on that track. And it seems like 40 years ago when he was running all over the bus. They used to run him and throw him the ball. Um, so I just think this Utah team doesn't have a lot to play for. And we talk about the front. Where do you think Utah ranks in sacks in the Big 12?
Wow. Middle of the road?
Yeah. I thought you would have guessed higher
Yeah,
based
I
on
mean, I
their
would
front.
have. They're not like they lost Jonah Ellis, who's now with the
Right.
Broncos last
Right.
year. They lost a couple big pieces.
They're 10th in the conference in sacks.
I would be curious to know when the last time they finished that low
Yeah.
in that category would be, probably before Whittingham got there, or maybe at the beginning of his
They
tenure.
they've only got 16, and they had 3 the other night. And I'd be curious to see how many of those they got against like Southern Utah and Utah State earlier this year. Um,
Mm-hmm.
I just I'm gonna give my game prediction here. Um, I'm nervous about this game because of Utah and because I've seen so many times Utah's won the last 7 against the Buffs, and most of them have not been pretty. Last year was about as close as we've seen a Utah CU game. CU's last win against them was 2016, the Pac-12
Mm.
South title year. Last year was about as close as we've seen because they've just destroyed them. This is different this year, but Utah still makes me nervous. That said, I'm going Colorado 31-13 in this one.
Yeah, so a lot of people, I know we're going to see it in the comments, don't really take much out of what happened last year because both teams had so many guys out. I really don't think much
Yeah,
translates,
I don't look at
honestly.
last year.
Well, yeah, that wasn't for you. That was for everybody else
Yeah,
because
yeah, yeah.
you're gonna see
Yeah,
in the comments,
right.
31-13. People are gonna probably be like 45-6. Brian, you're such a hater. Like
Yeah.
that's not what we're talking about. It's just those. I mean, Ryan Staub started. They had like who was it? Like their fourth string
Yeah,
quarterback
fifth, I
started.
think. Fifth
Yeah,
string, yeah.
it was so I would just not even read anything into that. And Utah fired their offensive coordinator midseason, oh, by the way,
Right.
or he resigned, right?
Yeah.
So this is a team in turmoil. The ironic part about where Utah is I feel like I probably couldn't point to a specific game, but this is a position that CU fans have become very comfortable with, where maybe you get robbed in a game. Well, maybe not even robbed, but whatever happens, you lose a tight one, and they're like you kind of all your wind out of the sails just and the next week is a really tough game. And oh, by the way, they're dragging you to play on national television in front of
Yeah.
everybody, the big noon game. I promise you this, every program says, yeah, we want to be on national TV. Utah doesn't this week. Promise you, Utah doesn't this week.
Yeah.
Not at all. They are a team that is probably reeling. Doesn't mean they won't fight. Doesn't mean they're going to give up.
Yeah.
But there will be able to be broken. It just will. As you mentioned, like this is a really tough spot for them coming in here.
Whittingham said this today, I think, that this is the toughest season he's been through.
That sounds
So
like
just to
deja
add to your
vu from
point.
us
Yeah.
and Pullman last year, right?
Right. Yeah.
Toughest thing I've ever had to do in my life.
Yeah.
When guys
But
win a lot
that just enhances your point. This is Utah's having a rough year.
and dragging them into the
Yeah.
spotlight is not where they want to be, and they're not
Yeah.
ready for it. They're
Yeah.
not ready for it. And as much as we can talk, maybe they'll have some guys that have good games, and I'm sure they will. But
Mhm.
this is how confident I wouldn't, Brian. I mean, and watchers and listeners, if you've been paying attention, would I have been this confident? Have I been this confident? I'm telling you, this is real now. It's
Mhm.
real. Their
Mhm.
defense is for real. Shador's the best quarterback in the country. Travis is a once in a lifetime, not generation, once in a lifetime player. I
Yeah.
don't believe we'll see anyone do what Travis is doing. I don't ever again. I honestly don't believe it. Maybe it
Right.
happens. I honestly don't think we'll ever see it.
Yeah.
It hasn't happened until now. And if it hasn't even been attempted, maybe somebody gives it a shot. Nobody's gonna be good enough to pull it off like this. I can promise you that much. And athletic and in as good a condition to be able to do it. So No, Utah's got the full deck stacked against them here. And this is the one other point I want to bring up. I'm glad you brought up Keithy because they lost their best player. I mean, they lost
Yeah,
their biggest weapon. Without him, they don't really have much other than
right.
Bernard. So you're gonna have to stop the run this week.
And Singer's good, but you don't have a
Yeah,
quarterback that
but
can get it to him.
I'm not worried
Yeah,
about him. I'm
yeah,
not worried about him. The other point I want to bring up though to CU fans, if you get online, you start talking trash because that's what CU's been doing this year. CU is not Utah's Super Bowl, by the way. Brian said it before in that little diatribe about
yeah,
BYU was last week.
yep,
Every team on CU schedule thus far, CU has represented their Super Bowl, not Utah. Last week
right,
was their Super Bowl, and they
yep,
lost it.
yep,
That's why, in addition to everything else, I am so confident. And Buffs fans, you can talk smack with Utah fans. Utah fans don't care about you. Utah fans
right,
have had their foot on your throat for
right.
ages. You beat them one year, yes. So what will get you next? Like that's the mentality there. You are little brother to Utah. So don't think that they're your Super Bowl. Don't go acting a fool talking to Utah fans because the Buffs are riding high right now. Let them get this win. I felt like that should be brought up for
Yeah,
people who don't know the history there.
yeah. So what's your score prediction?
Oh, uh, biggest and best win of the Coach Prime era in Boulder. They're going to start fast in this one. I've got them all over Utah. I've got 45-13.
Woo, you're gonna go 45 against that defense.
Yep.
All right.
Yep.
Well, we'll
Hey,
see.
if they do, this is how much I believe in how good they can be. And they're due for one of these at home. It is time for them to put their stamp on a big conference win at home. Not one that comes down to the wire, not one that you
Yeah.
eke out on.
Mhm.
It is time for a wire to wire win. Utah's offense is terrible. No Keithy. I know Singer's fine and Bernard.
Agree. Yeah.
They're terrible. If you don't win this game by 15 to 20 points, you didn't play well enough, in my opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry. That's
But
just
I
where
also
I'm going
think,
to sit on it.
and listen,
I
Buffett,
respect the hell out of Winningham, too.
I also think if they hit the 30-point mark, that's a huge win against this defense. To get to 45 would be massive, but like if they hit the 30-point mark, that's a big win against this defense.
Would you be surprised if they hit 45?
Yeah, against Utah's defense, I would.
Okay. Well,
I have
there's
that
your
much
blowout
respect.
fans who got on me for saying, Matt always calling for tests and close games.
Yeah.
I'm
Hey,
calling for the blowout.
I picked an 18-point win, which to me is a blowout against Utah. By the way, I was looking up as we're talking here.
Yeah.
Utah has 16 sacks. 11 of them have come against Utah teams. Southern Utah, Utah State, and BYU. So they
Yeah.
have 5 sacks in their other 5 sacks total in their
Yeah.
other games. So
I hope everybody knows that I really don't care about predictions. You know what I mean? Like
yeah,
every
yeah.
week I throw out the same
Look,
score.
I don't
This
care.
is how confident I am. I just want people to know, like, I'm not one of these guys that says, hey, I'm not going to call something and give you a score prediction and then put it out on Twitter
Yeah,
like I was right. This is how little I care about it. It's college football. Anything can
yeah,
happen. I'm calling for a blowout. That's what
yeah.
I'm calling for.
Well, we're both calling for a convincing victory. It doesn't
Yeah.
matter if
I'm
it's
calling for a really convincing one.
yeah.
Yeah.
I think it'll be really convincing. I
Yeah.
just have respect for that Utah defense that
Sure.
the Buffs and frankly the Buffs have played their best games on the road.
That's why I say they're
at
due.
home
And
is
hey,
right.
they haven't
Maybe
played
they're
a 10
due.
a.m. game.
Yeah,
They haven't played a 10 a.m. game at
yeah.
home yet this year.
So we'll see. Yeah,
We'll see.
awesome. Well, Matt,
There's a one other thing I wanted to bring up
okay,
with you. Heisman, Travis,
okay.
got signed, sealed, and delivered.
Period. What else you got?
Okay. Awards.
Let me just say this on the Heisman, okay? Because we mentioned that I threw out the odds on Twitter earlier
Okay.
that Shador is tied for 8th, and I know you commented on it saying that's ridiculous. I will say this: where I will say it's not ridiculous is that we have to remember those are odds to win it.
Mm-hmm.
He's not going to win the Heisman Trophy, right?
I'm aware.
And so I get where he's sitting the odds. I do not think that
Who are the 6 better players
I
outside
don't.
of Travis?
My point is that I don't think that means those players are better, but I think that like Shidor is better. He's tied with Quinn Ewers. He's better than Quinn Ewers, right?
Brian,
Do
it's
we,
not even in the same category. Quinn
right,
Ewers,
right,
who
right.
was asking for, well, anyway, that's a different story.
But my
Yeah,
point is
yeah.
like as far as winning the trophy,
Mm-hmm.
would you agree that Quinn Ewers has at least the same, if not better odds than Shador because he doesn't have a teammate taking points away from him, and he's the quarterback of a top 5 team.
No, he missed 2 games.
I get it. And I'm not saying he's better.
And he is the
I'm just
best
saying
backup quarterback in the country.
I know.
No,
I know that.
no.
Okay.
Dylan Gabriel is the only one. And
Right.
Cam Ward, honestly, now that they lost, he's out of the conversation because he's a big reason why they are in a lot of
Mm,
these holes. For me, I'm explaining my opinion. You're a
yeah.
voter. I'm not. Your opinion on this counts more than mine. You asked me. I'm telling you. The guys
Yeah.
that I consider for Heisman, I'd have Travis. I'd have Genty because I think Genty deserves to be recognized for the season that he's had. Then I would
Yeah.
have Gabriel. Then I would have Shador. That's how my list would go right now. Those would be my top four. Anybody else, quite frankly, I don't even think there should be anyone else in New York.
Right.
I
So
mean,
I will
Cam
say
Ward will
this.
probably be in there, but that would be my opinion.
Here's the ones ahead of Shador. And I don't want to spend too much time on this, but
Yeah.
you mentioned most of them. Travis, Dylan, Ashton, Genty, and Cam Ward. Those are the top four. There's a fairly big drop after that. Curtis Rourke of Indiana. He's not better than Shador. I think he has better odds to win the trophy because he doesn't have
hurt
anybody.
too. He missed a game too.
Yeah, but I mean, his.
I'm just saying. I'm
I'm
pointing
just
it out.
saying he's. I understand the odds.
They won without him.
He's not a better play. Yeah, but
would CU win without Shador?
No, but then you're not understanding my point.
Okay.
He is. I'm saying he's not a better player. I'm saying that he is the quarterback of a team that is doing something unbelievable they've never done before, and they're on the cusp of the playoff.
I know.
So I think that's why he's there. Jalen Milroe is ahead of him.
That is insane. I'm sorry, but here's where my point is. You go around the country and ask any of those coaches, which quarterback.
I understand that's not my point.
I know it's not your point.
That's not the
saying
question.
It's my
here.
point.
I know.
I'm riding for him. I got his
I know
back.
that.
Yeah,
I do. I do too. What I'm saying is the Heisman odds is. I understand when Vegas looks at this. They're coming. I think they're coming from the point of view of that historically this award is the top the top quarterbacks on the top teams, right? Mm-hmm. And so when you look at most of the lists ahead of Shador, what do all these quarterbacks have in common? Dylan Gabriel, Cam Ward, Curtis Rourke, Jalen Milroe, Jackson Dart, Quinn Ewers. Every one of them is a quarterback on a team ranked above CU. That's why they're on the board.
Oh, I know.
It doesn't mean they're better players.
They shouldn't be. I will fight for what's right. They shouldn't be. But we don't have to disagree on everything.
Bottom line, my point is this. If the trophy was literally as it says for the most outstanding player in college football, Shador would not
give a crap about record in this conversation.
Yes, but the Heisman traditionally does. That's what it's been. I'm saying if it was truly the best player in the country, Shador would be a top 3 or 4 guy, in my opinion.
I'm aware. You're not. Look, Brian.
But the odds are reflecting what history is, and so that's the only reason
600 Heisman voters, by the way, are probably going to agree with you more than they'll agree with me. I am well aware of that. I'm not trying.
It's not
to
agreeing
say
with
I'm
me.
Right, you're wrong.
It's. I think it's how they're going to vote.
Yeah, and
I'm not going to vote that way. Here's the other thing too that makes it tough. As a Heisman voter, I assume it's going to be the same as it's always been. We only get to vote a top 3. Okay. So you can only put 3 in there. And if I was doing it right now, I don't think I would have Shador in my top 3.
No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't either. That's why I put him 4. I put him 4.
Right. But this is why, this is why he's not going to be up there, in my opinion, because a lot of people aren't going to look at him as the top 3. I think a lot of people might have him as a 4 or 5, but there's not a spot for him.
Well, he's going to be the number 1 pick in the draft. So
yeah, I know.
All right.
No, I know. But I'm just explaining the Heisman. Yeah. Like I wish we could do a top 5. I think he would be up there higher if we could vote for a top 5, but we can only do a top 3. And if I was doing it right now, the odds are Travis first, Dylan second, Genty third. That would probably be my top 3, and I'd probably switch Dylan and Ashton. I'd probably go Travis first, Ashton Genty second, Dylan Gabriel third.
That's me. That's it. I think that's how I think that was what I told you. And look, I feel like I just don't love how every other year the number 1 guy in the country is celebrated and he's not nationally. It bothers me. Yeah. It does bother me. And again, because if you got to know who he really was, you a lot of these people would, and he even brought it up the other night, which is like, hey, when you come out with crap like that Texas Tech store did about how CU denied the flag, and there was a lot more to that crap, by the way, then people believe it because people are idiots. Let's be honest. Yeah. People don't understand how to vet sources and do research. They just read headlines for the
Yeah.
most part. Most people do these days. And if you take offense to that, I'm sorry. That's just how I feel about it. I mean, I think,
Yeah.
so when you see that stuff, you get some unfair narratives formed and they get parroted on television, like, Stephen A being, Stephen A and going, oh, well, the NFL product is so bad. I've got nothing to talk about on a Monday morning after an NFL Sunday. Guess what I'm talking about? Deion Sanders to the Cowboys, because I've got nothing else in my back pocket to go to. So look, I just
Stephen A just wants Deion to go somewhere other than Boulder.
Of course. Well, there's multiple reasons.
He's had him
for
at
that.
Florida
Yeah.
State, he's had him at Alabama,
There's multiple reasons for that.
People have been trying to get him different jobs ever since he took this one. So,
but Stephen A's doing it because it's better for his business.
Right.
Stephen A really only cares about what's happening to number one here. Okay. He just wants him in a big market. He wants him with the Cowboys. He wants him with wherever. So I can talk about him more and I can, kind of glom on more. Whereas I don't really like Boulder. So I have a hard time talking too positively about it because you're doing it there and not somewhere I want you to do it.
I agree with you, except that Deion Sanders is in a big market no matter where he is. Obviously. Because he's Deion Sanders.
That's why this whole thing is dumb.
That's why it's dumb.
Yeah, and that's why, by the way, he ain't taking another big college job. Because wherever he goes, it's big, and he's got it all set up perfectly. And by the way, whatever, those recruiting services just put crystal balls on Cardi Smith and Juju Lewis. So you do that. What does he need to go somewhere else for?
Right. Yeah.
Sorry. I mean, everything I've been hearing lately, and I don't know what you've been hearing, NIL numbers are they got money now, from what I've heard. I don't know the specifics on it. I haven't really done my own research, but from what I've heard, it's more than they had in the past. And I'll tell you, if they make the college football playoff, if you want this thing to be a national powerhouse and you want Deion Sanders, if they don't do it this year, to win the national championship as the first African-American head coach to do it at this level, you're going to have to show some support. Okay. That's the truth, especially with the way revenue sharing is going to go now.
Awesome, Matt. Hey, let's wrap this up. We got a lot to get to this week. I'll see you on Tuesday.
Sounds good.